Dugout Nation, welcome to the Dugout CEO podcast. Super excited to be joined today by Caleb Kimmel. Caleb is the CEO and founder of the World Baseball Academy, a nonprofit organization which uses the platform of baseball to exemplify excellence and leadership beyond the game. Former college baseball player, professional instructor, was the owner of Between the Lines LLC, also a tournament director at Hoosier Classic baseball tournaments, worldwide speaker, national leader, worldwide leader of international mission trips, an amazing guy from my hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Super excited about spending time with Caleb.
Caleb, welcome to the Dugout CEO podcast.
Hey, we're excited to be here, Casey. Appreciate you having us on.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a couple of years since we connected in person and good to connect again. I believe, we met in Fort Wayne a few years ago and we're both in the baseball world and the business world, and you have an amazing story to share. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, anytime we get a chance to share our heart, we're all for it. So, and yeah, it's exciting to cross paths with you again. It has been a few minutes since since we've done it last time. So,
yeah, well, good. Well, hey, let's start back at the beginning, Caleb. Baseball, how'd you become a fan, a player? Kind of tell us about your journey growing up.
yeah, I mean, that's obviously a long story. I'll keep it short for this purpose. But, growing up as a kid, I was a baseball, basketball kid, football kid. Always had a passion, especially on baseball and basketball. But, yeah, I was blessed. I grew up here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So went to Homestead High School and then played college baseball at Valparaiso University. But I was fortunate. My dad at a young age was very involved in the baseball community here locally with Little League and some travel leagues. And so part of my start, Casey, which was kind of interesting, was from an entrepreneurial start around baseball, where I was actually helping run baseball tournaments a little bit when I was in high school, and then actually in college when I was playing Division I baseball. Part of my internship that we created was actually running a small business with event planning around baseball with tournaments. So at a young age, I kind of got exposed to the entrepreneur side of baseball, and then when I graduated, like most students, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and the passion of baseball kind of resonated. So I've been very blessed to make most of my career within youth development around the game. But like I said, I've always loved playing the game of baseball. Now I love using the game of baseball as a platform to impact young people. And I know there's a lot of dynamics that go with that story, but that's the nutshell shaved way down.
Yeah,
So
I love it. And growing up as a kid, who was your team? Who was your favorite players? All that kind of fun stuff.
yeah, well, I was a Cubs fan. Here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, you got Tigers, Cubs, Reds, White Sox, but the Cubs were always my favorite team growing up, and yeah, so
And favorite player, if you look at the Cubbies, because I'm a Cubby guy too. So favorite player you liked.
yeah, it's funny. Jerome Walton. I was growing up in that era when he was Rookie of the Year, so he was a big guy. But obviously, Sandberg and Dawson, those kind of those players resonate with me. Now, when I was younger, I was a Cubs fan, but I kind of gravitated. My favorite player, Ken Griffey Jr. though, like that was the guy that I followed, and just obviously he was just a fun athlete to watch develop, and the father son combo. And he just seemed to do everything the right way, play hard, those kind of things. So as I kind of got into my teenage years, Ken Griffey Jr. He was the man for me. So that was the guy I followed a lot.
Yeah. What was it about him, you think? Because I think he's a lot of people's favorite player. Like, they know him. He's his own, brand. He has his own,
Yeah.
feel when you think about his name. What do you think it was about him as a player, or even his brand, that just made him appealing?
When we were younger, I think it was just his flair and his style. It looked like he just made the game fun, right? And there's some players today that kind of, I think, resemble that as well. But yeah, it was attractive. His swing, the left-handed swing was beautiful. The diving catches in the outfield. So like every kid, just dreamed of being Ken Griffey Jr. one day. So that was fun to watch.
I think that's key, because so many baseball people turn into business people, but they play baseball because it's fun, and they get into business, and almost like the fun gets out of business. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, business really is a game, just like baseball. And if you can figure out a way to make it fun, that's even better. With what you're doing now, with all the different things you got going on, how do you keep it fun? How do you keep it, run it, treat it like a game rather than a business? Because businesses sometimes become a grind. How do you make it fun to do what you do every day?
Yeah, I think you hit on a key point. I mean, baseball teams, sports in general, but in particular baseball, there's so much of what you learn within the game that's transferable everyday life. We hear that all the time. The perseverance, the discipline, especially baseball being a game of failure. You learn how to deal with that adversity, and then you can use that in the business world. But I think that competitive desire for an athlete is absolutely transferable, right? When you get into the business world, competitive, not just to see how much money you can make. I mean, I know some people get hung up on that, but you want to be able to create something that's successful, right? And you have the drive, the perseverance. So want to be able to figure out how do I make whatever I'm doing successful? And I think that grit, determination from the sports realm, like in particular baseball, with all the failure, I feel like playing baseball feels like that was harder than running a business in terms of dealing with all the, the failure within the game and within a team construct of, letting your teammates down, or at least that's how you feel. But I've been able to use what I learned on the field and transfer that into the business acumen as well. And so, and I haven't really shared, what it is I do, and I can kind of jump into that. So, I've been pretty blessed. I'm the CEO founder of the World Baseball Academy. That's been quite the journey. We're a nonprofit here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we serve about 8,000 kids a year. We do the traditional baseball things of tournaments and instruction. That's great. But what's been unique with us is we do international baseball mission trips. We're one of the few groups, in case I know you're aware of this, one of the few groups in the world that do international baseball missions outreach, not on a huge scale, but then also locally. We have a very significant outreach for at-risk youth. We're now serving nearly 2,000 kids a year in a wide range of mentoring programs that are often free for kids throughout the year. And that's where kind of my passion for business and be successful has kind of turned into a passion for youth development. How do we figure out a way to use the game for all the right reasons? And it's been a journey because we started in 2003. Now it's 2023, so we've been doing this for 20 years. But the World Baseball Academy, we own and operate the Ash Center campus here in Fort Wayne, and so we've been neat. It's been neat to be able to take an old campus, renovate it. Now it's truly a community asset, Casey. I know you've been up here for a little while, but the Ash Center, the World Baseball Academy, really is starting to get valued in our community as a true community asset. Not just because of the quality facilities, but because of the impact we're having on kids, day in, day out, trying to really use the game for all the right reasons. And we see a lot of the adversity within the game of, out of whack perspectives and all those things, especially at the youth level. And we're trying to bring perspective back to parents on what really matters about the hearts of our kids. And so we got a lot going on at the World Baseball Academy these days, for sure.
So starting this thing back in 2003 from now, like when you started it, what were those few first years like? Like, how did you become the success that you are? I mean, impacting the amount of people that you're impacting today, was it always that easy, or what did it look like in the early days?
Yeah, no, I laugh and say, if I had known to be this hard, I never would have done it, right? But we always joke and say youth and ignorance was on our side. but part of my story was, it goes back to, even in those college days, I was blessed to start a business while I was in college running baseball tournaments. So it started as baseball tournaments. When I graduated from college, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was still running baseball tournaments, got my first job in the hotel industry. And then really by God's grace, I kind of came across this old beat up sports campus here in Fort Wayne called Tecumseh. And when I say it was beat up, it had been let go. It had been a deteriorated sports facility, but I walked in there as a young entrepreneur, and right away my eyes lit up saying, wow, this could be the home site for the tournaments. So it started with tournaments. I'll tell you today, I'm not that passionate about tournaments. We run tournaments, but the passion has certainly developed over time. But what happened with me was jumped in as a young entrepreneur, still living at home, and doing the long distance relationship with my wife out of Valpo. And so I was living at home. I could take a risk. So started a for-profit company on the event planning side with tournaments, and we kind of grew that into instruction. And I was blessed because at that time, Casey, there weren't that many tournaments around. Today, there's tournaments everywhere. But at a young age, I was fortunate that I was dealing with, local pro athletes, college scouts, pro scouts running the tournaments. And so my network in baseball kind of grew. But when I was 26, actually when I was 25, I really started getting challenged from a faith perspective, Casey, on what are you leading for, Caleb? Right? I mean, you're starting to have young athletes be around you. We're starting to do instruction, starting to elevate your status on a local level. Not that that's anything significant, but I found myself at the age of 25, 26, asking the tough questions from a faith perspective on what are you leading for? Is it just status, ego, money, pride? And I started really kind of a faith journey saying, all right, God, you got my attention. What do you want me to do with my life? And I was blessed, Casey. I was dealing with, at that point, high-level international leaders within the game, Major League Baseball managers, pro athletes, pro scouts. So the network was growing, but the question was still, what am I using it for? And in 2006, this is where my journey drastically changed. I hopped onto a high school missions trip with our church to El Salvador. But I told our lead pastor at the time, say, hey, I have this passion for baseball too. And I had some international leaders in my life kind of telling me, get involved in the international scene. And so we went to El Salvador to do a high school missions trip. But in a conjunction with that, I connected with the El Salvadorian Baseball Federation and did some baseball outreach when I was down there. And Casey, that trip changed my life. I mean, that was a clear defining moment in my life where God really got a hold of my heart. And when I came back, I mean, it took time to develop what does this mean and look like. But I really started looking at the game saying, okay, how can I use this for a greater impact in the lives of kids than just trying to grow a business? And so I actually ended up giving up my LLC, my for-profit company. We transitioned into a nonprofit called the World Baseball Academy. And yes, we were doing tournaments and instruction, but then we started doing more international missions outreach. And so I found myself in El Salvador, and then the next year, Mexico, and then Lithuania, and then our friends over at UPI. I went with them to Cambodia. And then I was in Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and Canada. And so had a chance to kind of see different places of the world using baseball and ministry. And that kind of resonated with how do we bring the mission field back home. And so that's where we started working with the Boys and Girls Club and YMCAs and started to figure out how can we reach all kids using baseball as a platform to really mentor them to be difference makers in life, not just great athletes. That's a byproduct that it's great if we accomplish that, but really trying to use the game for bigger purposes in the hearts of our kids. And so that's where it's just continued to grow from 2003 till now. And now our community is starting to see the World Baseball Academy as truly a youth development entity, not a baseball entity. And a baseball entity isn't bad, case not at all. It's just, we take pride in saying we're trying to do something greater than just the traditional baseball components. And so we've raised over $5 million from donations to renovate the campus. And now we have programming support for outreach initiatives from foundations and companies, individuals. But it's been quite the journey. So I'm talking a lot, but that's all part of the story on how this came to be. It really comes back to God got a hold of my heart, and we've been trying to be faithful to what he's leading us to do with the time and resources he's given us.
That's great. Now, I want to go back to what you mentioned, Caleb. It hit me hard. What are you leading for? That question. Everybody listening to this podcast is a leader in some realm, whether they're leading at home, they're leading at work, they're a coach. Do you think a lot of people ask that question, like why they do what they do?
Yeah, probably not as much as we should. And we should continually ask ourselves that question, right? I mean, we should be asking ourselves that question today, right? Because we can drift from that purpose. But for me, what happened was I'm giving talk to these elementary, middle school, high school kids at a young age. I mean, in case I'm like 25, 26, just out of college. And what I realize is they're hanging on every word I have to say, like even the parents, because of the experience in the baseball world. And so that was the moment where I'm like, whoa, my influence matters. Like they're listening to everything I have to say. And that's where hopefully God got a hold of my heart and kind of humbled me to ask that question, saying, all right, these kids are paying attention, parents are paying attention. All right, Caleb, what are you leading for? It's got to be more than just for you. And then the international missions trips changed my perspective from a global view. And then getting involved in our local church and having mentors, strong mentors that were men and women around me, really pushing me, encouraging me, kind of helped mold and shape the direction of the World Baseball Academy. And I'm fortunate people like Steve Sotier, that name wouldn't be well recognized in the baseball world, but he was one of the key leaders in the International Baseball Federation. Dr. Darren Van Tassel was in charge of the Olympic Games in 2008 in Beijing. Eric Wedge, and those kind of people be able to speak into my life and challenge me from a leadership perspective, really kind of helped challenge me, as well as my lead pastor, my dad, and other people in my life. So I've been fortunate to have mentors in my life challenging me as well.
Do you think a lot of people have those types of people into their lives, or do you think you're, I don't know, maybe different? I don't, what do you think?
I think I'm certainly blessed to have those people in my life, but also, Casey, I think this, like we have to pursue those relationships too, right? There's people want to invest in others, right? People that have experience and knowledge and a passion to develop others, like they want to pour into people, but we've also got to make the space in the room to allow their influence to get into our heart, to our head, and help guide us in this journey as well.
I was talking to Mike Moy the other day, baseball agent, represented MVPs, All-Stars, World Series guys, and I told him he knew me in my 20s when I was either too scared to admit I didn't have it all together, or I actually thought I did.
Sure.
And he came into my life and asked the right questions. But you're right. You have to ask other people for help. Do you think, like, as guys, men, baseball guys, we almost have this facade up sometimes where it's like, hey, we almost got to look the part, even though inside we are struggling? Is that common you see with, leaders and men in general?
Yeah, I think all of us battle that too. We probably want to look like we have it all together, for the status or trying to keep up whatever reputation we're looking at. So yeah, I think naturally it is hard to ask for help, but I think once you lean into that and you experience that, I think you become a much stronger leader. I'm all about a real true leader is the humble leader, right? Somebody who can humble themselves, that says it's not all about me. And don't get me wrong, we still have our selfish nature that leans into that every single day, right? We kind of lean into it. So we want it to be about me, but we have to be able to humble ourselves and look at the bigger picture, saying, all right, God's given us certain gifts and abilities. How are we using that for kingdom impact and to impact others around us? And so I see it as a responsibility too, right? We have a great responsibility with what he's entrusted us with for skills and abilities to use that for the right reasons. So is it easy? No. And that's why I think we have to seek out the accountability and the mentoring to help us continue to move forward with the impact that we're capable of.
That's great. What does a humble leader actually look like? You're running a business, you're a head coach, you're whatever role that you're in. What does a humble leader actually look like in action?
Yeah, and right now it's an interesting season of life because I think I may have mentioned to you, I'm also the interim lead pastor at our church right now. Talk about being humbled there, asking to lead the church, and that's been a new adventure for me for the last year. And so I'm trying to lead the World Baseball Academy as well as lead the church as best I can. And I've got kiddos that are 12, 10, and 6. And so we're helping launch some things with FCA as well, for some baseball industry. So it's a busy season of life. And so coming back to the question of humble, every day I've got to ask myself, it's really not about me. How do I look at the people around me, and how do I help develop them or make sure they have the resources needed to continue to do their job? And so this is a new level of humility of saying, man, I've really got to pay attention to the people around me and be conscious of how they're doing. Just because it's not about me. And now I'm wearing a new hat where I have a greater weight. And so it really does help me lean into trying to be more sensitive to what others need from me. And the challenge too is also time. Then how do you balance out your time with the needs around you? So I don't know if that answers that very well or not, but that's how I'm humbled right now, is that there's others that are looking to me for wisdom and guidance, and therefore I have to humble myself, say it's not about me. What do you need? How do we move this together forward?
And what does that look like? You have multiple priorities right now. You got the church thing going on. You got, your academy going on. It's how do you actually manage your time and make sure you're actually giving all of those people exactly what they need from you so they can be successful at what they do?
Yeah, it's a challenge. So that's the biggest challenge is I feel if I were to humble myself right now and say, I don't feel like I'm leading as well as I should be because the time is spread so thin. But yeah, it is discipline. It comes back to, you think of how we started this conversation. You can take some things from the baseball world, right? It's the discipline, the perseverance, the time management, all becomes really important on how do you make sure you manage your minutes well to make sure you're giving as best you can. But also for me, like my kiddos are still a huge priority. So I've got to make sure that, my relationship with the Lord is strong. And then I got to make sure that my relationship with my wife, who works with me at the World Baseball Academy at the church. So we're united in that front. I got to take care of my kiddos. And then it's, the World Baseball Academy, that actually probably the church and World Baseball Academy, those two can kind of go back and forth because I'm leading both of them. But priorities become important. So I've got to learn at the end of the day, I can't, there's certain times you have to leave a task not complete, which is hard for us in the Western culture, right? Because we're task oriented. So it's coming back to maintaining the perspective of what matters, and every day getting done what you feel like you're able to, but then also making sure you keep the right things in the right order.
Yeah, talking about time management, I was reading about Chipper Jones's old pregame and postgame habits and routines.
Yeah.
And it used to be in his 20s. He used to get there an hour before the game and just go to work, go out, come back the next day, and he was good. But as he got older, he had to create different routines to achieve the same level of success. And he was getting to the ballpark 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours early. But every game, whether it was a 1:10 start or a 7:10 start, he did the same thing in the same order day in and day out. And he literally made every day like the same thing because he had so many different priorities he had to do, but he knew the things he had to do in the right order, and he like mastered time. And I always look at these baseball guys where they have the on the field pressures, the off the field pressures, business things. And I just wonder how they do it well. Is there any baseball guys that you know of, players or coaches that you've seen that have really mastered the on the field stuff and off the field stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the time management is critical, and the mental, I mean, at the pro level too, the mental focus, obviously. I mean, we know this in the baseball world. It's amazing at the execution, at the speed at which they execute the pro level, and the intensity and the concentration, mastering that is phenomenal. So, when it comes to the baseball people, I don't know if anybody from the baseball world comes to mind, but I've got other business leaders and things that I'm around because, yes, I'm in the youth industry, but I'm around a lot of CEOs and nonprofit leaders and church leaders, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm constantly seeing that, that habit right, come up and say, how do they master the habit of time management, right? And being disciplined with, there's a book called Deep Work too that we recently read saying, how do you make sure that you can get the right amount of time on that focus time, right? Where you're going to dive a little bit deeper and protect that time. So like for me, when I'm doing sermon prep, things like that, I've had to really get disciplined saying, hey, my early AM hours, that's where I can maximize my time, right? With the mental focus. Later in the day, when I'm getting more fatigued, I can go into the routine task management modes, right? The things that you can do with kind of an autopilot. But I've seen others really have that rhythm of life where you're going to protect that key time where you have to do that deep work. And just balance that. So I see it across the board. I mean, anybody who's balancing a lot of things, you have to have that consistency of protecting your time management. So I don't know if that answers that well or not, but I see it all the time. It's every industry, whether you're a pro athlete or a leader managing lots of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. Confession, I have an office away from my house, and somehow my little 2-year-old daughter, she was in the yard and got out of the gate, and she comes and knocks on my window door here as I'm doing a podcast the other day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I just kept talking, and I see my wife come and get her and all of that. And then I talked to Connie, and I said, hey, honey, I go, that's really hard for me. She goes, your daughter just loves you and wants to spend time with you. My heart broke. And I'm like, what do I do here? My heart wants to be out there with her, but I'm also have this amazing guest, and I like have this time, and I want to be present wherever I'm at. And my wife and I had an amazing conversation. I said, hon, I go, wherever I am, I want to be. If I'm with you, I only want to be with you. And I'm working, I only can be at work, because whoever I'm with, I want to give them my full attention and full focus. And then we ended up, I think, double padlocking the gate. So our 2-year-old but that makes me feel good, because it feels like a lot of people in life, they're always pulled between priorities. And I want to be a good dad, but I need to run a good business. And I got to run a good business, because if I don't run a good business, I can't afford to put my kids through college. And I think it goes back to Caleb, that thing, what are you leading for? And that just hits me really hard.
Yeah. And it comes back to priorities as well. So part of me says, let the kiddo run in there, give them a hug, show whoever you're showing what really matters, right? And the other person, if they're not leaning into that, they might have a poor perspective, right? Because, dad comes first. But no, I can relate to that. I've had my daughter come into a Zoom call, and it's like, hey, this is life. And so I think people are more accepting of that nowadays too. But no, it comes back. It is a challenge for all of us, a balancing time. And so that's where I think we have to keep asking that question. What are we leading for? What is our priorities? And that's really kind of a daily question. And I try to start my day as best I can, saying, God, where do you want me to lead today? Right. We often say, I've been sleeping, you have not. You're at work. Can I join you in what you're doing?
Great. Well, Caleb, any advice you got for Dugout Nation here? You've obviously accomplished a lot. You've hit a lot of home runs here. Any major takeaways that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I mean, we didn't really touch on failures along the way too. I mean, that's one thing is, we hear that cliche, failing forward, which I love that idea. And this is why I love the game of baseball, because you have to learn to deal with failure, right? I mean, it's just very prevalent in the game, more so than other games at times. And so, there's been a lot of failures along the way. And I look back, and, we came on campus here at our little piece of the world, right, in 2003. We didn't renovate till 2017. So it took 14 years of building trust in the community. Now we were impacting more and more kids every year. But it was that perseverance, but we failed along the way, right? We failed on how we're communicating, how we're doing certain things. There's many times where it's like, we're going to go under. Like bankruptcy is around the corner, and now we're fortunate we're trying to build a multi-million-dollar endowment for the next 100 years. And so like we've come through all those failures. But I guess my point in that is, failure is healthy, right? I mean, it's okay to fail. It's okay to try things, and that's how we learn. That's how we grow. And I get concerned sometimes about young people nowadays that it seems like they're struggling more with failure, on it not being acceptable. And so that's one thing I try to talk with our young people through the game, as well as even in the church area, is saying, hey, it's okay to fail, right? God's got this, but let's make sure we're willing to take some risk along the way that allows us for personal growth. And so I don't know if that helps at all or not, but there's a lot of failure along the way to get where we're at. So it wasn't some pretty picture. We kind of see that map. It wasn't like from point A to point B. We have those little circles on the way. We go backwards 5 steps, go up, down, left, right, to be able to try to get where we're going. But it's been a journey, but it's been exciting to see God at work. That's one thing I can look back on. And through the hardest times, it's like, wow, he had a plan in that. And now you can kind of see it on the other side. And And now we're looking at saying, okay, well, what's God's plans for the next 20 years? And kind of leaning into that as we look forward to the future.
That's great. Well, where does somebody go to learn more about what you guys are doing? What else you got kind of in the works right now?
Yeah, so the worldbaseballacademy.com is our website. So, you'll see a lot of things on the traditional side that you'd think of: tournaments, camps, clinics, things like that. But, as you dive in a little bit more, it's pretty neat to see all the outreach efforts going on and the international missions as well. So that site is certainly a key resource to hop into. And like I said, other baseball people that are out there, we're a very collaborative entity, the World Baseball Academy. We've got partners locally, regionally, nationally. We partner with Caleb Senior Foundation not too long ago as well. We're doing international things. So we're always eager for partnerships. So if something you're hearing on this resonates with you, reach out, let us know. My email, my phone number, all that stuff's on the website. Be happy to connect with groups and see if there's not some synergy with like-minded leaders.
I love it. Last question for you. Putting you on the spot.
Yep.
Who won the World Series in 2015?
Oh boy, 2015. My kid would know that. Was it I don't know. I'm guessing it was the Astros. I'm throwing it out there.
I have no idea, but we all know who won in 2016, right? We definitely know that.
Yeah, that was the Cubbies, right?
The Cubbies. And I'll always remember when I got married, because I got married 3 months afterwards. So if anybody asks me what year, when I'm 50 years from now, I'll always remember. Well, who is your favorite Little League coach growing up?
Yeah, I was going to say that's an easy parallel in there. So, yeah, my dad was one for sure, because my dad coached me along the way. And, I look back on Rob Bowen was a friend of mine who played MLB level baseball, and his dad coached us. So Mr. Bowen comes to mind. And, my high school coaches come to mind, all those kind of people.
So I asked you one question. It's only 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. Now, your kid knows. I'm sure my kids, when they get to your kids' age, they know who won the World Series. But it's does it really matter all that much?
No, it's a great leadership thing. I've done speaking engagements on that exact topic to say, who we do remember? Remember our kindergarten teacher, our first grade teacher, second grade. You go right down the list, and you can remember your little league coaches, your high school coaches. It's because of the investment of time, right? And it's the relationship. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Right? And that's what the heart of what you're getting to is those people invested time in our lives. They built a relationship with us, hopefully a good one. I know there could be some damage out there, but that investment of time, that relationship, that's the power of sports too, and the power of a teacher or a coach. And so those are things that matter. If we were to try to name 10 world leaders, probably couldn't do that either, right? It's just world leaders that we think wow, they're on a global scale, but they're out of sight, out of mind very quickly because they haven't had a personal impact on us. I think that's what you're getting at when you ask who won the World Series or who was the Super Bowl MVP 5 years ago. And at the end of the day, those things aren't as impactful as the people making investments in our lives.
Yeah. So Dugout Nation, I want you to go out and call those Little League coaches, call those high school coaches, those teachers, and thank them, and then go out and be one of those people. Yeah. Nobody's going to care what your balance sheet looks like at the end of the day. Your employees might, because you got to run a great business. You got to do things the right way. You got to be profitable, because profit does help people, but you also got to take care of your people. And this is really good. So Caleb, thank you so much for being on the Dugout CEO podcast, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm humbled to be a part of it. And, all the guests you're talking about, we're hoping to be a little piece of encouragement along the way.
Thanks, Caleb.
Appreciate it.
Dugout Nation, what a great time with Caleb Kimmel. He gave us some amazing things to think about and take action on that will help you become an MVP at what you do. Here are my big 3 takeaways that I got from Caleb. Number 1, keep asking the question of yourself. What are you leading for? And why are you doing what you're doing? Is it for fame or fortune or selfish ambition? Or is it about leaving a legacy, helping other people? That is really important, to ask yourself the why behind the what. Number 2, who won the World Series 5 years ago? Well, we know the Astros won in 2015 and the Cubs surely won in 2016. But I bet you can tell us who was your favorite coach growing up or your 5th grade teacher. We can often remember those people that make a big impact in our life. That's what's important. It's about relationships and investing in other people. Not always about the wins, although wins are important, but it's about impacting the next generation. And number 3, developing the people around you is the key priority for any great leader. You have to give your team your time and the tools they need to succeed. In order to do that, create an open and honest environment so your team can tell you what's working, what's not working, and what they need from you to be the best at what they do. If you're able to do that and be present with your team when you're with them, you will create a bunch of all-stars.